On September 30th, 1972, Roberto Clemente stepped to the plate in the bottom of the fourth inning at Three Rivers Stadium. He hit a double off John Matlack of the New York Mets. It was the 3,000th hit of his career. Only 10 players in baseball history had ever reached that number. The crowd gave him a standing ovation. His teammates poured out of the dugout. Clemente tipped his helmet the way great players do when they know the moment belongs to more than just them. He was 38 years old. He had a gold glove arm that scouts still talked about like something that shouldn't have been possible. He had a batting eye sharp enough to win 4 National League batting titles. He had a World Series MVP and 2 championships. And he had something else, something harder to quantify but impossible to miss. He had become larger than baseball. 3 months later, Roberto Clemente was dead, and baseball has been asking what it lost ever since. To understand the weight of that question, you need to understand who Clemente was before the end. He came to Pittsburgh in 1955, a young player from Puerto Rico arriving in a league that was still navigating the early years of racial integration. Baseball in the 1950s was not easy for a Latin American player. The language barrier was real. The cultural gap was real. The casual indignities of that era, the way players like Clemente were talked about, written about, and sometimes mocked in the press for accented English or emotional expression, those were real. Clemente navigated all of it. Not quietly, not by lowering his head and staying out of the way. He was proud, openly, unapologetically proud. He played with a fire that some writers misread as temper, and others recognized as the only honest response a person of his talent and dignity could have to the conditions he faced. On the field, he was extraordinary. 12 consecutive Gold Gloves, 4 batting titles, a career batting average of .317, and that arm. Baseball people who saw Roberto Clemente throw from right field described it the way people describe watching something that cannot be real. Joe Posnanski wrote about 2 Clemente throws in the 1971 World Series in his book, Why We Love Baseball. Plays that stopped people cold, that made grown men in press boxes lean forward in their seats, that became immediately part of the permanent memory of everyone who saw them. By the early 1970s, Clemente was no longer just a great player. He was a symbol. For Latin American players coming up behind him, he was the proof that it was possible. Possible to come from where they came from, to look the way they looked, to speak the way they spoke, and still stand in the middle of the field with the best players in the world. That was not a small thing. That was an enormous thing, and it was still growing. But on December 23, 1972, a massive earthquake struck Nicaragua. The death toll was staggering. The city of Managua was devastated. Relief efforts began almost immediately, but Clemente came to believe that supplies were not reaching the people who needed them. Clemente had already been involved in earlier relief efforts for Nicaragua, and when he heard that the supplies were being diverted, he made a decision. He would go himself. He believed, and this belief was completely consistent with everything he had ever done, that if he was on the plane, the supplies would get through, that no one would dare intercept a cargo overseen by Roberto Clemente. The plane he boarded on the night of December 31st, New Year's Eve, 1972, was old, and later reports said it was overloaded. There were documented concerns about the aircraft. The plane went down shortly after takeoff, into the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Puerto Rico. Roberto Clemente was 38 years old. His body was never recovered. He had been scheduled to report to spring training in a few months. Roberto Clemente would be 91 years old today. Let that sit for a moment. Not a statue, not a name on an award, not a black and white photograph. A man, still here. Think about what the next chapter of his life could have looked like. He retires around 1975, maybe 1976 if his body holds. He walks away with somewhere between 3,200 and 3,400 hits. More Gold Gloves. More batting titles if the bat stays sharp. A career that by any statistical measure belongs in the conversation with the greatest position players the game has ever produced. But the numbers are the smallest part of what baseball loses. Picture Roberto Clemente in 1979. The Pittsburgh Pirates win the World Series. The famous We Are Family team, Willie Stargell at the center of everything, franchise moment. Now imagine Clemente is in the building, retired but present. A figure of such gravity that his presence alone changes the atmosphere. Who do the young Pirates go to when the pressure gets big? Who do the Latin American players on that roster, and on every other roster in the league, look to when they need proof that the game can belong to them too? By the early 1980s, baseball is beginning to discover what the Dominican Republic and Venezuela have to offer. The pipeline does not build itself. It is built player by player, decision by decision, relationship by relationship. And it is built in a baseball world where the conversation about how Latin American players are treated, about dignity, about respect, about whether a player can be great and proud and from Puerto Rico all at once, that conversation is still ongoing. Now imagine Roberto Clemente is alive to be a part of it. Not as a memory, not as a name invoked in speeches, as a living, breathing, undeniable voice. The most respected Latin American player in baseball history, alive and speaking and impossible to dismiss. Does that pipeline form faster? Do the players who come through it arrive in a game that has already been pushed by Clemente's presence towards something more worthy of them? We don't know, but we know the direction he was already moving. Think about the players who came in the decades after him. Tony Perez, Rod Carew, Dave Concepcion, Ozzie Guillen, Roberto Alomar, Ivan Rodriguez, Pedro Martinez, David Ortiz, Albert Pujols, Miguel Cabrera. Every one of them grew up in a baseball world where Roberto Clemente was the name, the proof, the answer to the question of whether it was possible. Now imagine he was not just a memory to those players. Imagine he was a mentor. Imagine he was in the clubhouse or on the phone or at the winter leagues or sitting in the stands in Puerto Rico watching the next generation come up. Imagine the conversations that happen in that version of baseball. The guidance, the advocacy, the quiet insistence on dignity that he was already known for before he ever boarded that plane. And then there's the humanitarian legacy. Clemente had already been doing this work before it was common, before athletes were expected to have foundations, before giving back became a phrase in every press conference. He was doing it because he believed it was simply what you did with the platform that you had. In the version of baseball where he lives, that work continues. What does it grow into over the next 30 years? What does it look like when the most famous baseball player from Latin America has spent 3 decades using his platform to direct resources, attention, and dignity towards the communities that built him? We have the award that carries his name. We do not have the man. Major League Baseball created the Roberto Clemente Award, originally a community service honor established in 1971, renamed in his memory after his death. It is given every year to the player who represents his values. It's one of the most meaningful individual honors in the sport. But here's what strikes me about it. The award exists because he died. In the version of baseball where Clemente lives, there is no award named after him yet. There's just Clemente. Older now, silver-haired, slower on his feet, sharper in his mind, standing in the background of the sport he gave everything to. Still here, still demanding more from it, still being exactly who he always was. Some baseball what-ifs are about championships. What if this team had stayed healthy? What if that trade had never happened? What if this pitcher's arm had held? Those are real losses, real stories worth telling. But the Clemente what-if sits in a different place, because Clemente had already done enough to be remembered forever. 12 Gold Gloves, 4 batting titles, a .317 average, a World Series MVP, 3,000 hits. The question is not whether Roberto Clemente's career was great enough. It was. The question is what he still had left to do, not on the field, but in the world. The last thing Roberto Clemente did was try to make sure that people he had never met in a country that was not his own received the help that they had been promised to them. That's not a baseball story. That's a human story. And it's the reason his absence still carries weight, not just in the record books, but in the ongoing story of what baseball could be and who it could belong to. If you want to see where Clemente fits in the larger story of baseball, Ken Burns' baseball documentary covers his legacy and his era in a way that does real justice to both. The link is in the description. And if you want to read about those 2 World Series throws that stopped people cold, Joe Posnanski's Why We Love Baseball is also linked below. It is one of the most genuinely moving baseball books I've ever encountered. Roberto Clemente was 38 years old. He had just gotten his 3,000th hit. He was on his way to becoming something baseball had never quite seen before. And then, on the last night of the year, he was gone. Some losses stay with a sport. This one always will. If this story meant something to you, subscribe. Every week I go back into baseball's past and pull out the players, the decisions, and the moments that deserve more than a footnote. Ken Burns' Baseball is linked in the description, and so is Joe Posnanski's Why We Love Baseball. Both are worth your time. And if you want another baseball story, watch this one next.